I'm going to start this morning with the koan that I tempted you with last week and never got to. And it's Daisu's Aeonic fire, and it comes from the Book of Serenity. A monk asked Daisu, when the fire at the end of an aeon rages through and the whole universe is destroyed, is this destroyed or not? Daisu answered, destroyed. The monk said, then it goes along with that? Daisu said, it goes along. A monk asked Lanji, when the fire ending the eon rages through and the whole universe is destroyed, is this destroyed or not? Lanji said, not destroyed. The monk said, why is it not destroyed? Lanji said, because it is the same as the universe. So there's a bunch of interesting things going on in this koan, not the least of which is that you have two teachers giving seemingly opposite responses. But I want to start with the first of the two monks. And I think some understanding of this monk's motivation, why is he asked this question, is really valuable. But actually, I'm going to segue on that because I thought it's interesting to understand what this is saying when it refers to eon. And the eon is assumed to be pointing to the same kalpa. You may have run into the term kalpa in other writings. And kalpa was an Indian term, and this, of course, is in China. So in case you didn't know how long a kalpa is, here is how the Buddha defined it. Imagine a huge empty cube at the beginning of the kalpa, approximately 16 miles on each side. Every 100 years, you insert a tiny mustard seed into the cube. According to the Buddha, the huge cube will be filled even before the kalpa ends. Okay. So, and I think they've figured that out. There are different types of kalpas, but we're talking in the vicinity of 16 million years. And then so somebody asked the Buddha, how many kalpas have we had already? And he said, you count the number of sand particles at the depth of the Ganges River, from where it begins to where it ends at the sea. Even that number will be less than the number of past kalpas. So we're talking a big span of time here, right? And so he's a monk. Why is he asking this? When the fire at the end of the eon rages and the whole universe is destroyed, is this destroyed or not? And Daisu says destroyed. Well, what I suspect is going on here is that this monk has had some degree of awakening or realization, enough to have experienced the reality that he is not the small ego self, that he is this vast, unknowable, unnameable reality, and he is not separate from that reality. But at the same time, it suddenly dawns on him, it's like, okay, well, great. I'm not this little person who comes and goes and so on and so forth. That's great. I'm not going to die. And then you go, oh, what about the whole thing ends? So he's still got his attachment to permanence and impermanence, right? He's still concerned about his mortality. And I believe that's what Daisu picks up here. He's understanding, he's understanding this monk asking this question because he doesn't like the idea that at some point it's going to cease to exist. And so I'm going to tear it away from him and say destroyed. Why? Because he doesn't want to leave this monk anything to cling to. Nothing solid, nothing permanent, nothing unchanging. Because that's the reality. That's the nature of the universe. That's the nature of our lives. But we're constantly trying to cling. We're constantly trying to make things solid and permanent. And of course, that's not their nature. And so the message, at least in this first part of the koan, is that we've got to give up all clinging, even to justice, even to our Buddha nature, whatever we want to call it, the face before our parents were born. Even that too must go. Even holding on to that is holding on to too much. And so Daisu says destroyed. So now we come to Longji. And he's asked when the fire ending the eon rages through the whole universe and it's destroyed, is this destroyed or not? Longji says, not destroyed. The monk said, why is it not destroyed? Longji said, because it is the same as the universe. So this is a very different answer. And it may be that Longji understands that this monk is coming from a different place and he's responding to that. Responding to his perception that this universe is boundless, indivisible, and therefore is enduring. Or he may simply be doing what Zen teachers often do and messing with the student's head. Ha ha. You think you got the answer from Daisu? Well, I'm going to tell you the opposite. Now, what have you got to cling to? So we are in our lives in this world. We are constantly on this quaking bog. There's nothing solid, and we're trying to make something solid out of it. We're trying to make it comprehensible. Right? All of these people, cosmologists and people like that, spend lots of time trying to figure out how this universe operates. And at the end of the day, there's nothing that can be grasped. There's nothing that can be understood. And yet we are so persistent. It's natural. It's our human nature. But that's why we're practicing this letting go. constantly practicing let go, and constantly dealing with, our tendency to want to wrap our head around everything, understand everything, put it in its appropriate box compartment, and so on. And that's something we need to let go of. Ultimately, everything. And I think that's where these teachers are pointing. They're ripping everything away from these two monks. And when that happens, what is left? When we fully realize that there's nothing solid to hold on to in this universe, what is left? That's what this inquiry of Zen is about. That is what our true nature is. That is our face before us were born. So I'm going to pause there and see what questions or thoughts you guys have.
I just finished John McPhee's book, Annals of the Former World. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a big 700-page book he wrote about geology in North America. He's a great writer, New Yorker staff writer. And when you start to talk about eons and culpus, this book is, I spent a couple of months getting through this book, and I was repeatedly barraged with the concept of geologic time. There's an outcrop of rock in Wyoming, for example, that unlike any place else in North America, you can look at it and you can observe 2,500 million years of the Earth's evolution. 2,500 million years, which is still just a sliver of the age of the Earth. But what I found spending these hours reading this book, wrestling with these concepts of tens and hundreds and thousands of millions of years, these culpas, that it just forced me to intellectually come to a place of such a diminished sense of self that it was profound in a way that years of practice and wrestling with this notion never brought me to such a place before. And I just wanted to share that because I found that the sense of what's permanent, the sense of self, all of that was just in the face of thousands of millions of years, it's nothing. So I just found in a very tangible, physical way, this lesson from the earth that was just a really profound reminder of my place in space and time.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. As you were saying that, I was thinking about astronauts, and how many of them undergo a sort of spiritual transformation that results from space, out in the vastness, and seeing the Earth as a dot, and kind of just having our whole perspective of space and time turned upside down. So I imagine it's kind of a similar thing in terms of, experiencing our true insignificance, which is far more than we can imagine. Okay, so I can't leave us here. We're sort of on top of the 100-foot pole at the moment. We're sort of in this moment of realizing business and insignificance and so on and so forth. So what do we do? How do we step off from this 100-foot pole? What's the point of this?
I have something to say. It's kind of similar to Doug, but much closer in time. I was helping my son work on a homework assignment. He had to write a paper on something called apologia. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's Plato's supposedly verbatim account of Socrates' trial. And a lot of light streaming into my face. And so we're going over this, and it's it's Socrates sort of arguing his case for why he should be acquitted, and then ultimately why he should be like sort of banished instead of put to death to the citizens who are the jury. And I was struck. I don't mean to laugh, but I was struck by, here's Socrates, this person who has stood the test of human time and is a household name still and a great philosopher, basically just really fighting for his life and wanting to stay alive at the end of the day. And I thought, my God, it put into perspective for me, like we really are all the same, even if we're, Rob Cameron or Socrates, and everyone in between. It's just, the survival instinct and the mechanisms of ego, and the individual gain was profound. So that sort of in a different way, I guess, than what Doug was talking about, but sort of strikes me as similar, because it just is like, wow, yeah. If it was this way for Socrates, it's a really tough thing to break the bonds of the ego.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I don't know if, well, yes, there are people who have that completely successfully, I believe. There are such great sages who have, I think, completely eliminated their attempt to ego. But that's not most of us, right? It's kind of it's a process, but it's probably not every perfection, as all things in this life don't. But I think the other side of this whole equation is that as we understand and realize these things, we also realize how precious life is. And not just our life, the lives of all beings, the lives of every blade of grass are precious. You know, all these things that are happening never happened before and will never happen again, never in this vast geologic time scale. And our lives are this extraordinary accident. There's another kind of those measurements that the Buddha describes to talk how fortunate we are to be born into a human life. And again, it's like one of those all the sands in the Ganges thing. It's, you know, that's how infinitely small the chances are of our being born as human beings, of having this opportunity to live. So this is kind of the other side, right, of this reality. And I think it brings to us the importance of using this life well, of living well, of being, we talked a little bit about gratitude, of being grateful for this opportunity and for all that comes with it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, we know nirvana and samsara are the same place, and they are right now. The suffering exists alongside of the wonder and the peace and all of those things. That's the nature of this reality. You know, I think that's a, you know, I think it's easy. I think people who often kind of just read about Buddhism or read about Zen and don't become practitioners can get in the trap seeing this all as sort of nihilism. And then like, why does it matter what I do? Because it's, you know, it's all an illusion and we're all going to die anyway, you know, blah, 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 you know. And yet this other so important. It all is precious. It all, you know, we did the, I don't know how long ago we did the koan where the Buddha asks in a sanctuary. Were you guys listening to that? You know, I'll just, you know, paraphrase it quickly. Buddha and Indra, who was in the Indian pantheon of gods, the highest of the gods, were walking together one morning and said, this would be a good place to create a sanctuary. And Indra picks up a blade of grass and sticks the blade of grass in the ground. Excuse me. And he says, the sanctuary is created. Right. So right here, right now, in the most ordinary things, the sanctuary is created. Right here among all, you know, this amidst the busyness, the divisiveness, the insanity, the fear, all many things that people are experiencing today. This is also the sanctuary. And it is all sacred and it is all, therefore it is important for us to take care of it as best we can. It's important for us to help to end the suffering of others as best we can. To be as compassionate as we can every day. As we live our lives here on the sort of on the head of the pin. We're on the head of the pin, and we do it the best we can. So in the midst of you're all looking very pensive, I'll tell you a happy story. Many of you have been here at some time to Turtle Marsh, walked out in the marsh with me and the woods and so on. And recall that the marsh has been beaverless for a couple of years. And there are consequences to that. But anyway, yesterday I was out walking and I got to the point, some of you that, again, those of you that have been here remember where the little meditation hut is being built. And just beyond that, the trail was underwater. And I thought, why is this trail underwater? This is strange. We haven't had that rain. And so I explored it a little further. What I discovered is a new colony of beavers has moved in. And they have restored the dams and they've flooded a huge area. And of course that will have such that does everything, because then all the waterfowl can come back in, and the wading birds can come back in, and muskrats can come. So much life is dependent on those beavers. So we were really thrilled to see them back. And this is like an advertisement for the meditation hut, because come and sit in the meditation hut next summer. You'll be able to watch the beavers doing their thing, swimming around. But kind of an exciting side bit. What does that have to do with Kalpa's eons? Beavers don't know anything about Kalpas and eons. What do beavers do? They be beavers. They do the next thing that they need to do. They go chew down a tree. They go take care of their babies. They slap mud onto their lodge. They don't make it complicated, do they? Yeah, beavers get it. The same way in Nanchuan's koan about the cats and the cow. Nanchuan says the sages, the ancient sages do not know it is. Cats and cows know it is. We could just amend that. Cats and cows and beavers know it is. They all have something to teach us.
Peter, it sounds to me a little bit like this koan when you talked about, what do you have when you let go of everything? Sounded like Mount Sumeru. And Mount Sumeru is there. And then not there, insignificant. And then it's, when you come back, it's there. But you've been transformed by the way you perceive it. So we can be transformed by comprehending how insignificant we are, but then coming back to Mount Sumeru and the beaver and just where we are.
Thank you. Yeah. We always need to come back to that. That's where we live. There's no hierarchy between the relative and the absolute. As you know, it's very tempting because when initial practice is focused on coming to have this experience of the absolute. And so the 10 results from that is think, oh, this absolute, this is special. This is, and I mean, it is in a way. It's not the ordinary reality that we experience. It's a whole different way of experiencing the reality. And yet, there is no hierarchy between the relative and the absolute. There's no hierarchy between the vastness of realization and, changing a diaper. They are equal. They're equally important. In fact, just this ordinary reality is the door in. It is the spiritual path. And sometimes that's hard. Not sometimes, almost always hard to see. Things are so crazy right now. So much anger and hatred and fear and COVID and on and on and on. So many things, It's the samsara aspect, right? But we can't experience the nirvana aspect without going through this samsara, because they're inseparable. We embrace the whole thing. Everybody's so quiet now. Good. Those final thoughts or questions before we wrap up?
I just have one other comment based on the talk that Jim gave last night for the Dharma talk. And he said the sage declines to be
Susan, you're breaking up. We can't hear what you're saying.
Jim said in his Dharma talk last night that the sage declines to be special. Somehow that seems all connected with what you're talking about today.
Were other people able to hear
Just to the point where, Susan, you said that the sage declines to be special, and then everything, for me, everything else was frozen.
Oh, sorry, I don't know what I can do.
Well, in a
You gotta
nutshell,
move.
that's says a lot.
You got to move to a
That
big
says a lot.
city so
That's
you have
enough.
better internet.
Yeah, I guess so.
Oh,
Move
you're good
next
now.
to the
Say it quickly.
beaver.
Say it quickly before you fade away.
I think Rob got it. The sage
Rob got
declines
it.
to
I'm
be
not
special.
Rob. I didn't get it.
Yeah, earlier. The
Rob,
challenge
state it
is
for
to
us.
not be special.
Not to be special. The man of no rank.
To be us.
We don't. That's the
Right.
expression, right? The man of no rank. And of course, it's a very gender-based expression.
But we want to think of ourselves as, oh, we are special. We need care of ourselves this way and that way. And when you look through the kalpas, we're not so special, and the challenge is to hold that.
Yeah. Thank you. You just took it full circle back to the layers of geology in Wyoming and the astronauts out in space, right? Isn't what they see. Everything that we think is special, including ourselves, is not. And yet, it is.
And yet it is.
Yeah. Gosh, all righty. Thank you so much, everybody.